Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. And Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. The topic that I wanted to cover today is the book Chinese Gleams of Sufi Light from Sachiko Murata. It's a wonderful book that looks at Sufism and Islam from the Chinese perspective. It is a scholarly work by Sachiko Murata that explores the influence of Sufism, which is mystic Islam, on Chinese culture, and it shows the connection between Chinese philosophy, particularly Neo-Confucianism, and Sufi thought, which shows the exchange of ideas between Chinese scholars and Sufi mystics throughout the course of time. And it shows the translation of Sufi texts into Chinese and how they impacted Chinese intellectual and spiritual traditions. And just that overall exchange and dialogue between Islam and Chinese civilization. As the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that in your quest for knowledge, go as far as China if you need to do so. So let's get into the book, and I'll talk a little bit about the author, and then I'll just get straight into the book. Sachiko Murata is a prominent scholar of Islamic studies and comparative philosophy. She specializes in the study of Sufism, Islamic philosophy, and the interaction between Islam and East Asian cultures. Besides this book, she has authored numerous books and articles on these topics, including this book right here, and just overall the significant contribution she has made between this intercultural dialogue and exchange between Islam and China. This book specifically looks at the works of Wang Taiyi and Lao Tse, and it shows the arrival of Islam in China and the work of these scholars in this interaction between Islam and Confucianism, right? So the Chinese ulama integrated Neo-Confucianism and Islam in their efforts to educate members of their faith. Wang Taiyi, spelled Wang Tai-Yii, Wang Taiyi, the first major Chinese Muslim thinker, incorporated Confucian learning into his Islamic theology. He demonstrated the possibility of a creative synthesis between Islamic and Confucian civilizations. The dialogue it shows in subsequent generations with Lao Tse, this is spelled Liu, which is pronounced Lao in Chinese, and Qi, Schih, Lao Qi, signaling the renaissance of the Sino-Islam. Lao's interpretation blended Sufi teachings with Confucian notions of self-cultivation and transformation. And this author, Sachiko Murata, her research sheds light on the comparative studies of religion and has implications for China and Chinese religion, East Asian thought and comparative civilization studies, and it just shows how all of this is interconnected in all of it. So going further, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, scholars surveyed Islamic writings in the Chinese language, but little attention has been paid to their actual contents. Chinese Islam has its own local peculiarities, but it has not departed from the orthodoxy of other Islamic lands. The Chinese ulama began writing in Chinese to educate the Muslim community and prevent assimilation into Chinese society. The writings focus on principles of the religion and were written in the language and intellectual school of Neo-Confucianism. The texts were intended for Muslims who were integrated into the Chinese elite. The ulama wrote in Chinese due to the rights controversy, rights with a R-I-T-E-S, and to adapt to the Chinese situation. The Chinese texts have no precedent in other Islamic countries and represent the first instance in which Muslims wrote major treatises in the language of an existing intellectual tradition. The ulama's use of Chinese terminology reflects Islamic civilization's adoption of non-Islamic idioms. Studying these texts can provide insight into how the Islamic tradition can deal with alternative interpretations of the universe. The book discusses the commonalities between Islamic and Chinese traditions in terms of their understanding of unity, nature, and cosmology. It emphasizes the misconceptions and stereotypes surrounding Islam and Chinese thinking, and highlights the need to discard these stereotypes in order to have a more inclusive view of religious diversity. The book also mentions the rich resources within the Islamic tradition and the ignorance of modern Muslims towards it. And Sachiko Murata argues for a more nuanced and comprehensive understanding of religious diversity and the shared features of different traditions. The importance of guidance from sages and prophets in achieving the goal of human life is emphasized in various traditions, including Islam and Chinese teachings. The goal of human life is to achieve human perfection in the Sufi aspect of becoming Insan al-Kamil, the perfect man, which is emphasized in Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism and Sufism. In order to achieve social harmony, individuals must conform to the Tao and cultivate their personal lives. The Chinese ulama, or the Chinese Islamic scholars, and Confucians share similar beliefs on social relationships. As we look into this book, it's divided into 7 parts, discussing the history and influence of Chinese language Islam in China. Islamic literature began being written in Chinese in the 17th century, and the writing focused on expressing the essential teachings of Islam in an appropriate manner. Islamic scholarship has its own criteria for distinguishing the essential from the accidental, and the branches of Islam have developed into major areas of study. Jurisprudence addresses right action, while theology and philosophy address right understanding. The third branch focuses on right intention, sincerity, and spirituality. Islamic norms are established through consensus, and there is no centralized authority. Sufism, which emphasizes the essential over the accidental, has been influential in spreading Islam. The Chinese ulama face challenges in expressing Islamic teachings in Chinese due to the difficulty of the transliteration. Unlike other languages, Chinese does not permit easy transliteration of Arabic words. Therefore, Chinese Muslim authors had to use pre-existing Chinese words to convey Islamic ideas. Islamic terminology in Chinese has historically been a challenge due to the lack of equivalents for important Islamic terms in Chinese. Terms like Allah had to be translated with heaven and Buddha being used in earlier periods. The names of important Islamic figures were also translated, with Muhammad being referred to as the sage or the chief servant. The Islamic tradition itself was called the pure and real teaching. Wang Taiyi, an important figure in Chinese language Islam, wrote the real commentary on the true teaching and had a deep understanding of Islamic learning, despite not being fluent in Chinese. Wang Taiyi, a Chinese scholar serving the Muslim community, initially had difficulty communicating with well-educated Muslims due to his limited knowledge of Chinese. However, he eventually mastered the intellectual arts of his time and engaged in discussions and debates with other Chinese scholars. Wang's works record his debates and conversations with scholars of various traditions, including Muslims, Taoists, Buddhists, and Confucians. He presents Islam in a way that aligns with Confucian ideas and often quotes from Chinese classics. Wang's disciple, Liang, explains that Confucian teachings like discussion of creation and eschatology, which are important principles in Islam. Wang's training is unknown, but he appears to have a strong foundation in theoretical Sufism. However, he rarely cites Arabic words or mentions Muslim scholars in his writings. And Wang's work demonstrates his effort to make Islam understandable to those unfamiliar with its teachings. The book discusses the influence of Chinese Muslims Wang Taiyi and Lao Che on Chinese language Islam. Wang Taiyi's treatise shows traces of Sufi theoretical teachings, and Wang focused on Neo-Confucian stuff. Wang found Neo-Confucian metaphysics sufficient for explaining the idea of the Tawhid. Lao Che was more sympathetic towards Confucianism and saw no discrepancy between Islamic teachings and Neo-Confucianism. Lao Che's works include The Philosophy of Arabia, aimed to harmonize Islamic teachings with Chinese traditions. Using Sufi works and Neo-Confucianism as sources, Chinese language Islam discusses the origin of the 10,000 things and the real substance and principle behind creation and transformation. It explores the separate endeavors of the 10,000 beings and how human nature and the human body come to be manifest. The book also delves into the virtues preserved in the human body, heart, nature, and mandate, and how everything described in the previous chapters returns to the One. The book also highlights the Arabic translation of Lao Tzu's philosophy by Ma Lian Wan, which presents Lao Tzu's teachings in terms familiar to theoretical Sufism. The translation demonstrates the balance between knowledge and power and the influence of Chinese thought, particularly yin-yang thinking. The book discusses the concept of the spirit, which is a created reality that displays knowledge and power. It explains how the trace of knowledge gives rise to the universal soul, which is the reality of all possessors of spirits, while the trace of power gives rise to the universal intellect, which governs inanimate things. The cooperation of knowledge and power brings about two types of spiritual reality, one centered on awareness and the other on activity. The teachings of this book also discusses the differentiation of the dust or the universal substance into frigid and fervid forces, which give rise to fire, water, and the four elements. The interplay of these forces lead to the differentiation of the universe. Only 3 Islamic works have been translated into Chinese, and the primary criteria for considering a work a translation is the availability of the original text for comparison and adherence to the original text. Further, various translations of Islamic texts into Chinese, including their translations of Sufi works, is also highlighted in this book, and the influence of Neo-Confucianism and how it assimilated concepts from Taoism and Buddhism, and how Lao Tzu and Wang Taiyi incorporated all of this during their time in China. The Chinese tradition, including Neo-Confucianism, was highly diverse and dynamic during the same period. Neo-Confucian thought centered around concepts of principle, nature, and destiny or mandate. The Tao was understood as the way to follow in daily affairs and human relations. The great ultimate and vital energy were important concepts in Neo-Confucian thinking, representing different aspects of reality. Principle and vital energy are two sides of the same reality, with vital energy determining the movements of everything. Hisin, H-S-I-N, or thought, was associated with the heart and the process of refining human nature. Cultivation of the self involved aligning oneself with the Tao and refining character traits such as humanity, righteousness, propriety, wisdom, and faithfulness. The book discusses the concept of the heart in Confucianism, emphasizing its substance and function. It explores the idea of Jin, or humanity, as the highest human good. Then the discussion shows the relationship between mandate and nature and the differentiation of the 10,000 things. And it shows that learning can purify and clarify human nature, allowing individuals to embody the principles of heaven and exhibit virtues. And it also includes the work of Wang Taiyi, The Great Learning and the True Answers, which were one of his works. And Wang's works often include translations of passages from the Quran, sometimes mixing them with the Hadith. And it goes into further works by Wang, the 3 minor works, and provides examples of exchanges and true answers where Wang answers questions on various topics. It's important you recognize the real Lord and understanding of one's origins in order to serve the divine. Some teachings argue that heaven and earth are superior to humans, while the true teaching emphasizes loyalty to the one Lord. The true teaching also discusses predetermination and freedom, the return to God, and the importance of marriage. It distinguishes between immortals and demons and emphasizes the combination of yin and yang in humans. The true teaching focuses on loyalty and sincerity and emphasizes the importance of learning and deeds. The Huahua HUI-HUI, are seen as mirrors of the pure and the real, with two types of returning of the body and returning of the heart. The ultimate goal is to recognize the real Lord and embody the non-ultimate. And also the importance of the concept of no mind in Taoism and how its various principles and practice also relate to Islamic observance. Mercy is important in pursuing the principles of affairs and following the true Tao. Those who prioritize profit and name become hypocrites. Cultivating the Tao requires sincerity, remembrance, and obedient deeds. Animal sacrifice and diet choices are also there in terms of the cross comparison between Islam and Chinese culture. Gambling, drinking, interest, and hoarding are discouraged. Feng Shui is seen as ignorance. Death is seen as the true mandate. Life in the earthly world is seen as a passing show, and the afterworld is seen as the consequence of one's actions. And also, if you look at the creation of Adam and Eve and their fall from heaven, it emphasizes the wisdom and purpose behind their actions, and also the reason for their descent into the earthly world, and shows the moral lesson about the importance of understanding the true nature of all things. Faith, which is in Chinese culture called Imdin, IMDN, in Islam is seen as a submission to the will of God and includes belief, conviction, and commitment to the unseen. Wang Taiyi defines Imdin, or faith, as the fountainhead of clear virtue and emphasizes its importance in Chinese thought. The real solicitude, Aimana, refers to God's care for humanity and is evidenced by fear, hope, and happiness. The signs of real solitude or solicitude brings comfort and allows individuals to see beyond material things. Wang argues that heaven, earth, and all things exist for the sake of humans receiving the real solitude. The ultimate treasure of real solitude or solicitude is often neglected by people in favor of external pursuits and desires. But those who gain the real solitude will guard it closely and view it as precious. Now you got to look at the differences between the Confucian and Islamic versions of the Great Learning and the theological orientation of the Islamic work and world compared to the social orientation of the Confucian work. And if you look at the concept of transcendence and immanence in the Chinese tradition, it shows you how many differences you'll see in the Western and Islamic traditions. Further, Wang Taiyu's emphasis on the discernment between God in his essence and God as designated by names and attributes shows this distinction is essential to Islamic theology. Wang believes that his Chinese audience may have difficulty understanding this distinction due to the lack of differentiation in Chinese tradition. The term Chen, meaning real, plays a significant role in Islamic text and is used to convey the notion of God's, you cannot compare it, and similarity, his transcendence and immanence. Wang also explores the concept of unity in Islamic faith, particularly the interrelationship between the real one, the numerical one, and the embodied one. And it shows how the many can derive from the one without compromising its unity. It's like the concept of the 99 names of Allah, right? You have the one true Lord Allah, and the 99 names represent different attributes of it. Same thing you have in Hinduism as well, where you have Brahman, the one real Lord, and then you have the different gods and goddesses which represent different attributes of that same creator. So it's all intertwined with each other. Now, further, the emphasis on the importance of learning and obeying the teachings of the real Lord and the utmost sage are stressed in the teachings of this book. And it shows that you have to unite the teachings of the real Lord and the numerical one, and the importance of clear virtue and self-knowledge. Proper cultivation of oneself leads to the regulation of the family, governance of the country, and the ability to recognize and take witness to the truth. Bearing witness to the real Lord is the ultimate task, as it brings true loyalty and filial piety, or piety. So just like the Shahada, right, the declaration of faith in Islam, that there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So that is basically bearing witness to Shahada. The real Lord witnesses himself in all things, and humans bear witness to him through their existence. The creation of human beings is to recognize the unique oneness of the real Lord and represent his function. Unfortunately, many people are blind to his mercy and worship emptiness and idols. Discriminating the one has three levels: the unique and independent one, the one that is the root of numbers, and the one that is recognized with the body. So now that you know that, to become a perfect human, Insan al-Kamil, one must recognize that the real Lord is independent and has nothing to do with the world. It's like what the Yazidis believe, that the real God has nothing to do with the world and cares nothing for the world. In its place, he has a representative that acts on his behalf. There are three levels of bearing witness: the root nature, the root allotment, and the root act. It is important to enter the true teaching of the pure and real in order to cultivate oneself and widen the Tao. The root nature is the original being of the real Lord, which transcends yin and yang and has no opposite. The root allotment is the movement and the quietude of the root nature. The root act is the surplus of the unique and independent one, which possesses all of the quiet qualities of the formless. With the help of the root act, the principles and guises of the 10,000 things are brought forth. The 10,000 affairs and things find their origin in the root nature of the real Lord. The numerical one is the root of all things and is known by various names. The originally honored represents the root nature and is like an ocean that never overflows. The representative is the issuing disclosure of all things and is related to movement and quietude. The scribe is the surplus of the pure essence and represents transformation of yin and yang. The embodied one is the human level and embodies the principle of the non-ultimate. Recognition with knowledge involves imitating the wisdom of the sages. Heaven and earth, water and fire, wind and the earth, sun and moon, stars and constellations, seasons, day and night, metal and stone, grasses and trees, water creatures, flyers and land walkers, all exist in different forms but are perfectly arranged by the real Lord. To witness the real Lord, one must reach the stage of practicing one, where one learns, knows, is faithful, sincere, and loyal. Recognition with seeing involves recognizing the real Lord with the body while transcending all conditions. Recognition with continuity involves returning to the fountainhead of clear virtue, recognizing the real Lord without depending on the self. The ultimate level is unity in union, where everything is with the Lord. The created and newly born things continue in the original being, right? The fruit becomes perfect and settled, and it is the beginning of the no-bearing witness. The human ultimate and the non-ultimate are connected and produce fruit. The purpose of the 10,000 beings is to bring together the one great cause and condition. Overcoming hardships and dangers will lead to the perfect, complete, true fruit. The highest level is beyond witnessing, and there are three levels of perfect fruit. Ancestor is the fruit of all things. Sages are the fruit of human beings, and the utmost sage is the fruit of all sages. Understanding this is necessary to manifest the root nature of the real Lord. People are blinded by worldly distractions and materialism and fail to recognize the real one's being. Only those who can see clearly will return to the original Lord. The real one and powerful being are like the root substance of light and the shining of light. The numerical one is the clear brightness, and the distinction between the powerful being and the numerical one is very important. The creative transformation of the 10,000 things requires both designing the game and looking and observing. All levels rely on clarity. Without the Lord, nothing can have its own being. People have the ability to choose, and their desires shape the creative transformation. The causes of good and evil are rooted in the real Lord's creative transformation, but the choice of going beyond or not is up to the individuals. All humans are rooted in clear virtue, but their desires can lead them astray. Reward and punishment come from mercy and severity, depending on wisdom or stupidity. Pleasure and wrath have separate beginnings, but both have always existed. Movement and quietude cannot be undifferentiated. Fall into delusion, path of delusion, lamentable. Ocean pure and clean demands wind. Waves support turtles and dragons. Waves of compassion subside, leaving only compassion. Fish and creatures of water preserved forever. Rivers and lakes are manifestations of the ocean, but ocean remains separate. Water reflecting bamboo's shadow, not related. Wind and flowers fragrance together, but not the same. And the quiet nature in representing substance and function is also there. Power to being is clarity to light. The numerical one is like an ancient mirror. Sages are its attendants. Heretical teachings and wrong Taos rebel against the root, the rebellious devils. Life and death caused by unique and independent honor. Real Lord and numerical one have power, and others fall into delusion due to self-satisfaction. Real nature is light of clarity. True heart is the mirror. 10,000 things are officials. Beautiful women or beautiful woman and mirrors' lights are not the same. Those who recognize themselves can recognize the real Lord. Darkness needed to awaken to clarity, life, and death, essential to understand real being. Everything controlled by life and death is sentient being. Real one is beyond. Mandate and nature are different but inseparable. True teaching has guides to virtue. Heretics are tainted by evil custom. Worldly endeavor and wealth can be used as weapons against heretics by true people who do possess these resources. The book discusses the dangers of following teachings that promote rebellion and deviation. It emphasizes the importance of true teachings and clear indications in guiding individuals to find the truth and escape illusion. And it urges individuals to reflect on their actions and intentions and to avoid emptiness and non-being. The book criticizes those who promote non-being as the true path and highlights the power of humans to pursue propriety and righteousness, and it shows the need to understand the division between true and false to truly be human. The importance of recognizing the true Lord and the teachings of the pure and real is needed and needs to be recognized. And it shows the role of the Naqshbandi order in Chinese Islam and the influence of Abdul Rahman Jami, a famous scholar of the later period, who shows his immersion in the school of Ibn al-Arabi is also shown in this work and book. His commentary on Ibn al-Arabi's Fusus al-Hikam, which Sheikh Wahid Azal is doing a course on currently, is mentioned as a popular and influential book. And it shows that in order to understand a lot of this nature, the study of Fusus al-Hikam is also very much needed for those following this mystical path or Sufi path in all of its totality. Now, the book also talks about the Persian poet Jami, right? Abdul Rahman Jami, and a lot of his explanations on what he's teaching, notably his work Lawai, which focuses on the concept of oneness of existence. Jami explores the practical and theoretical aspects of this concept, emphasizing the importance of understanding and remembering God, and the importance of the relationship between God and the existence of the world and other beings. All things are both identical and different from God, existing through God's self-disclosure and seeing the perfect man as the human being, as we're taught in Islam that we're the representatives of God on this earth, and we are a high-ranking creature. The world is the locus of God's self-disclosure, and everything within it derives its existence from God's act of showing himself. So we basically contemplate God's mystery through our creation and seeing the world And God contemplates his own mystery by looking at us and viewing everything through us. There are different levels of self-disclosure, moving from undifferentiation to differentiation. The things that appear through self-disclosure are called fixed entities, and they have no existence of their own, but rather exist in God's knowledge. The relationship between God and the created things is ambiguous, and each individual must investigate and verify their own understanding. These fixed entities are also referred to as realities or tasks, representing specific activities of God. It's like that one scene in the second Matrix movie where Neo meets with the Oracle, and she discusses that everything is a program that's functioning because of the way that it was designed. The first entification is the concept of God knowing himself and becoming an entity, and it includes the divine names and attributes as well as the fixed entities of all things. The manifest and the non-manifest of existence are also discussed in this book, with existence being one and the appearance of entities being the manifestation of the one entity of being. Lao Tse's translation of Jami's Lawai emphasizes the transcendence and uniqueness of the principle and the differentiation of the 10,000 things. He focuses on the necessity of endeavor and righteousness or meaning in the first part, and uses the term real being to describe the transcendent concept of God. And what is the real being? It is the divine essence that exists, and Lao Tse contrasts it with the illusory being attributed to creatures. He explores the idea of non-existence in connection with fixed entities and the principles of the universe. The book suggests that the non-ultimate represents the pre-existence of principles before the appearance of forms. Lao Tse adapts the discussion to Chinese thinking, disregarding terminological nuances. The book also discusses the reduction of things to the one principle and the concept of self-disclosure in different contexts. Lao Tse simplifies the discussion to align it with the Neo-Confucian worldview. The book further discusses the differentiation of forms and images and their relation to the one principle. Lao Tse cleverly interprets proper names as symbols for different mentalities. And Lao Tse also shows the need for a new translation of Jami's Lawai due to the outdated understanding influenced by Neoplatonism. You have to know the importance of having one heart and one focus in order to find righteousness and clarity, and to emphasize the need for endeavor and the rejection of distractions. And you also have to reflect upon the idea of dispersion and gatheredness and the need to turn away from worldly causes when you need to do so. You need to have a pure heart and seek the reality of things as they are, and not to sugarcoat anything in your journey. Now, the book also tells us the importance of focusing on God and not being distracted by this world and materialism. And it urges us to turn towards God and detach from the material world, and emphasizes the temporary nature of everything except for God, where it even says in the Quran that everything will perish except his face, as we are all temporary guests in this world and all of us will have to leave one day. So the encouragement is there to be a seeker and seeking the unboundness of God rather than being restricted by worldly attachments. In order to maintain a strong relationship with the real being, one must be constantly aware and present in every moment and state. This requires effort to free oneself from distractions and negative thoughts. By conquering selfishness and focusing on the real, one can achieve unity and experience the pleasure of this relationship. Returning to the one means cutting off attachment to worldly desires and being solely aware of the Lord. Uplifting the awareness and purifying the heart can help overcome selfish desires and experience the taste of the Tao. The seeker must prioritize nurturing and strengthening this relationship, as it is of utmost importance. The reality of the real is beyond human comprehension and perception, as it is a source of beauty and perfection. The book discusses the importance of guarding one's heart and focusing on the Tao. It explores the concept of the real being, which is beyond transformation and exists beyond the 10,000 things. The book touches on the different meanings of existence and the relationship between attributes and the essence. It discusses the connection between substance and function, and it explores the idea that the root substance cannot be named or given similatives, but can only be named in relation to the outward world. And also the concept of hiddenness and manifestation, as well as the receptivity of the first entification, is also touched upon. Further, the discussion is there on the names and attributes of divinity and lordship, and how the essence is clothed by them in different respects. And also about the manifestation and witnessing of the real being in different realities, and the goal of realizing the name-derived perfection and the essential perfection in your journey in this path. The book emphasizes the wealth and completeness of the real being and how all things are gathered under different categories. And it also mentions the relationship between knowledge, power, acting, and making, as well as the division and discrimination of different kinds of things. The discussion is there on the idea that all things are ultimately connected and rooted in one principle or essence. It emphasizes, this book in this particular part, the importance of removing names and divisions that separate beings and concepts in order to see their underlying unity. And you also have to explore the relationship between the real being and the tasks and attributes that manifest through it. The reality of existence remains unchanged despite the changing manifestations and appearances. The book discusses the concepts of penetration and obstruction in relation to the real being. It emphasizes that while penetration does not seek obstruction in terms of substance, it demands obstruction in terms of function. And also the ideas are explored on the principles, forms, and names associated with different levels of existence, such as divinity and lordship. The real being is described as having many levels, with each level having specific names and designations. And the different levels of the real being, including non-movement, movement, and differentiation, also need to be looked at in your study and path. The book discusses levels of existence and their manifestations, emphasizing the unity of all beings and the interconnectedness of the real and the world. It also mentions the different perspectives on the nature of the cosmos and the mistaken beliefs held by certain groups. The world is constantly changing and flowing in stages, and within these stages lies the mystery of the pervading reality. The error of the sophist is that they do not recognize that the one reality is veiled in the forms and accidents of the cosmos. The world is all image, but within it the reality constantly reveals itself in different ways. Each instant brings forth a new manifestation, and at every breath a world goes to non-existence and another comes to exist. The forms and images of the world are the outward expression of the real being. The world exists through the opposition of different names and movements, and it is constantly in a state of change. The world is not a static entity, but rather a collection of accidents gathered together in the one entity, which is the reality of existence. The images within the world can only be portrayed as their outward forms, and the essence of the real being cannot be fully understood through names and images. The lords of theory argue that concepts like endure are not distinct from others, but rather express requirements of differentiating different things. However, this view is prohibited and unacceptable. The claim that there is something substantial beyond the one entity is null, and the opponents cannot provide proof. The book advises against seeking meanings without removing veils and encourages striving to lift veils and turn to God. The real being pervades all existence, and everything is contained by one principle. Power and acts are attributed to humans from the real's manifestation, not from their souls. Existence is seen as good, and evil is perceived as the absence of existence. Examples of hail causing fruit corruption and killing being evil are given to illustrate this concept in this book. All beings have knowledge, and the level of knowledge depends on the receptivity of the being to the real being. The attributes of the real being pervade all existence, making them the same as those attributes. Entities' essences are described as unbounded but bound in the realm of manifestation. The real being pervades all things, with some having supremacy and others being subservient. The substance and function of the real being are also the substance and function of all beings. The presence of the real has two self-disclosures, one as the absent, knowledge self-disclosure, and the other as the witnessed essential self-disclosure, right? Both substance and function are related to the Lord, and all acts and attributes are attributed to the Lord. The transformation of the form is seen in power, while the transformation of the principle is silent. The manifesting of realities in words is considered illusion, and silence is better than talking and listening. Now you have the concept of viewing God and knowing God, and this is what the teachings of this book is highlighting. Cross-comparison, you have the significance of seeking knowledge, practice, self-awareness, and the role and respect of the parents. And both Islamic and Confucian teachings are also highlighted. Now, the discussion is there on the various topics, including the association of Eve with primeval and supernatural beauty. The expression causes and conditions in Buddhism and the concept of interdependent arising are also related on these paths of Confucianism and Sufism. And you have the different scenarios from the Quran, the Taoist expression before heaven, and the concept of flowers in the sky in Buddhism. And when I was a young child, I had a vision of seeing this old man who was sitting in the clouds, dressed in all white with a big beard, and he was throwing flowers upon me in that vision that I saw, flowers in the sky. And that's something amazing that I was able to connect with in the teachings of this book as well. Color is visible on the human being, while the quiet nature is not seen but can be detected through its traces. And that, if you look at the cross-comparison teachings of Buddhism, Sufism, Confucianism, I've covered these topics before on this channel as well for those that have been following me, so you know that it's all teaching you the same thing in the end. The book also discusses Jami's usage of the term philosopher and its connection to the Avicenna's teachings, and it explains the concepts of the soul achieving the guise of existence and becoming unified with absolute beauty. And the term from the Naqshbandi called relation and its significance in the disciple-master connection is also shown. And towards the end of the book, Sachiko Murata also shows the different correlations on poverty, annihilation, fana, and the language of the birds. And it also shows a prayer composed by Jami. As we head into the conclusion, the book discusses various philosophical and theological concepts in Ibn al-Arabi's teachings, including terms such as transcendent oneness, immanent oneness, lastness, gathering, differentia, specificity, divine and engendered realities, essential, necessity, individuals, worlds, disclosure, seeing disclosure, independent I, predication, and levels of existence. And also you have the different realities that we're dealing with. God's knowledge includes possible things that may be given eternal existence. The non-manifest of existence and the non-manifest of knowledge pertain to the essence and its tasks. The term contrariety and effectuality are discussed in this book. The difference between all merciful mercy and compassionate mercy is shown on God and these different attributes of God. The divine name Qadr, meaning all subjugating, is discussed in relation to the relevance on the last day. And Sachiko Murata mentions Jami, Avicenna, who is Ibn Sina, Ibn Arabi, and all of these cross-comparison teachings with Sufism, Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism. And it also discusses the concealment of the real realm, drawing references from Zen Buddhism, Neo-Confucianism, and Mencius. The terms Chung-Yung and non-awareness are also explained in this book. The importance of self-emptying and recollection of God is emphasized, and the concept of colors and guises is mentioned as a Buddhist expression. Now, this is a great book, as someone who's also always done these cross-comparison lectures, and this is something that I've been doing for a long time now. For those that have been following my channel, you can look up all of the presentations that I've done on Confucianism, Buddhism, and at that time I was comparing them to Masonic teachings, but it's all interrelated. Sufism, it's all these paths are teaching you the same thing in the end. And this is what Sachiko Murata is highlighting in this book as well, in Chinese Gleams of Sufi Light. I hope you were able to benefit from it, and a disclaimer that I represent myself only, and this is just for education and entertainment purposes. I will put the link in the description below. Please get this book and support this great work by this great author. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours.